A poor girl is kicked out by the fiancé for being too poor. The billionaire groom yells, "She is my daughter." The fiancé fires back, "How could you hide this?" But when the girl starts to speak, everyone begins to cry. The Grand Regency Hotel's ballroom sparkled as if bathed in liquid gold. Italian crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling in cascading lights, reflecting thousands of shimmering points onto the champagne flutes being passed around among the guests. David Whitmore adjusted his silk tie and inhaled deeply, taking in the blend of expensive perfumes and imported flowers that filled the air. There he is, the man of the hour. A familiar voice snapped him out of his thoughts. Charles Blackwood, his mentor from his early business days, maneuvered past a group of executives to give him a warm hug. David smiled, flashing those perfectly aligned teeth that had cost a small fortune in dental work. "Charles, I'm so glad you could make it," David said, patting the older man on the back. "Miss the engagement of the year, never." Charles stepped back to look him over. "Look at you now. From the back office of the company to the cover of Forbes. I always knew you'd go far, but this..." He made a sweeping gesture at the ballroom filled with celebrities and magnates. "This has surpassed even my expectations." David smiled again, that same grin he'd practiced in front of the mirror hundreds of times until it looked genuine. The smile of a man who had conquered the world. "Not too shabby for a kid who started out washing cars, huh?" he said, repeating the origin story that never failed to impress people. The truth was a bit more complicated, but no one in this ballroom needed to know that. Nobody here needed the details of the tiny apartment he used to live in, or the nights he went to bed hungry. That version of David had been left behind, buried under layers of success and reinvention. On the other side of the ballroom, Veronica Hastings observed the scene with hawk-like eyes. Her custom-made Valentino dress clung to every curve with mathematical precision. The diamond necklace around her neck was worth more than many of the cars parked outside. She leaned over to whisper something to the event manager, who immediately hurried off to adjust the position of a floral arrangement. "Darling." Her voice sliced through the air with effortless grace. She never needed to raise it. People naturally fell silent when she spoke. "The Morgans have just arrived. Come greet them." It wasn't a request. David nodded to Charles and headed toward his fiancée. As he walked across the ballroom, he felt the weight of countless eyes on him. Admiration, envy, curiosity. He was used to it by now. At 38 years old, David Whitmore embodied everything these men and women aspired to be. Wealthy, powerful, successful, about to marry one of the most coveted women of high society. "Everything is perfect," Veronica said through clenched teeth, her smile never faltering. Her grayish blue eyes took in his appearance swiftly. "But your left cufflink is slightly askew." She adjusted the tiny detail with deft fingers, like an artist adding the final touches to her masterpiece. David was her latest conquest, her most valuable trophy, the man who had rocketed to success and was now ensnared in her perfectly woven web of social connections and appearances. 15 minutes until the formal announcement," she informed him. "Father will propose a toast, then you'll say a few words. Nothing off the cuff, please. Stick to what we rehearsed." Veronica didn't wait for a response. She spun on her perfectly balanced heels and glided away to welcome another group of VIP guests with a warm smile that never reached her eyes. "David, my golden boy." Harold Hastings, Veronica's father and a real estate titan, opened his arms for a hug. His face, flushed from expensive whiskey, and his booming laughter stood in sharp contrast to his daughter's controlled elegance. "Harold," David greeted, accepting the awkward embrace. "I couldn't be happier." The older man slapped David's shoulder a bit too hard. "I always wanted a son, you know, and now I have you, a real winner, to carry on my legacy." David swallowed hard. The legacy, the Hastings empire, the merger of the companies after the wedding, the contracts were already signed, the fortunes set to be officially united. It was a marriage, but also a corporate acquisition disguised as romance. "Thank you, Harold. It's an honor." The words came automatically, like everything else he'd said that night. Smiles, handshakes, pats on the back, all part of a carefully choreographed dance devised by Veronica. When he finally got a moment alone, David made his way to the huge window overlooking the city lights below. For a moment, he allowed himself to think about how much things had changed. 10 years of obsessive work, calculated decisions, and constant sacrifices had brought him to this point. The soft clinking of glasses caught everyone's attention. Veronica stood at the center of the ballroom, flawless as a painting. Beside her, her father held up a champagne flute. "It's time," a waiter whispered, appearing at David's side with a fresh glass. David took a deep breath, shook off his thoughts, adjusted his impeccable suit, and walked toward what everyone said was his final destination, the top, the apex, the peak of success. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harold's voice reverberated around the room, "raise your glasses to celebrate not just an engagement, but the union of two of the most powerful dynasties in this city." Applause rang out as David took his place beside Veronica. She slipped her hand through his arm, her fingers icy cold even in the warm environment. "Smile," she commanded without moving her lips. "This is our perfect night." And David smiled, because that's what everyone expected from the man who had it all. The sound of clinking glasses and the murmur of conversations filled the ballroom as David offered a mechanical grin to yet another group of important men. Deals and business hints had become as common as greetings. Every handshake carried the implicit promise of millions changing hands in some quiet office the following week. "And so we closed that deal in the financial district," commented a man in a grey suit, his thick eyebrows moving like caterpillars as he spoke. "3 historic buildings. We'll demolish everything and build a corporate complex. The profits will be phenomenal." "Demolish?" David asked, feeling a twinge of discomfort he quickly suppressed. "Don't those buildings have any historical value?" The man laughed as though David had told a hilarious joke. "History doesn't pay the bills, my friend." Or is the great David Whitmore getting sentimental now that he's reached the top? The other men in the circle chuckled politely. David forced another smile. Behind those smiles, he knew they were constantly assessing, calculating, watching for any sign of weakness. "Just questioning the market strategy," David replied, slipping back into the character he had crafted. "Sometimes perceived value can be monetized in creative ways." The men nodded approvingly. The real David, the one who still cared about things beyond money, was pushed once again to the back of his mind where he couldn't jeopardize the show. Across the ballroom, Veronica glided among the guests like a queen greeting her subjects. Her polished smile never wavered, but her eyes remained cold as precious stones. David watched her bend slightly to speak to a senator's wife, feigning interest while sliding in some useful details about a pending bill that could affect one of her investments. Veronica was flawless at this game. It was one of the qualities that had first attracted him, her calculated ability to manipulate social situations for tangible gains. Now, after 2 years of dating, he saw clearly that she used the same skill on him. "Mr. Whitmore," a waiter approached discreetly. "Ms. Hastings asked me to remind you that the main announcement is in 20 minutes. David checked the platinum watch on his wrist, a gift from Veronica to replace the old Seiko he'd worn since college. "Too functional," she'd declared, tossing it in the trash. "Thank you," he said to the waiter, who vanished as silently as he'd appeared. David walked to the bar, feeling the need for something stronger than champagne to face the speech ahead. The bartender, trained to recognize important faces, was already preparing a whiskey as he approached. "Double, sir." "Please." The amber liquid burned down his throat in a comforting way. David gazed at the ballroom, feeling strangely disconnected from all that opulence. He had worked tirelessly for 10 years to gain entry into this world, so why on the night that was supposed to mark his ultimate triumph did he feel that lingering emptiness? His gaze swept over the extravagant decor. Imported flower arrangements that cost more than many people earn in a month. Ice sculptures slowly melting, glistening under carefully positioned lights. Important people wearing jewelry that could feed entire families for years. Everything felt simultaneously impressive and hollow. His glass was nearly empty when a subtle commotion began near the entrance. At first, David paid no attention, probably some celebrity arriving late, causing a stir among the guests. Maybe that famous actor Veronica insisted on inviting without ever meeting him personally. But then he noticed the security guards moving discreetly toward the entrance, and something about their organized movement triggered his instincts. Years of building an empire had taught him to sense disturbances in order, the smallest signs that something was out of place. Veronica noticed it too. From where David stood, he could see her entire body tense, though her face remained serene. With subtle, almost imperceptible gestures, she directed 2 more security guards toward whatever the problem was. Nothing would ruin her perfect party. David started toward the disturbance, more curious than worried. As he got closer, he saw the guests near the entrance drawing back slightly, forming a small circle around something or someone. He heard murmurs of disapproval, snatches of phrases like, "How did they get in?" and "Call security." That's when he saw, through a gap in the circle of disgusted guests, a little girl. She was small, thin, wearing a faded blue dress torn at the hem. Tangled brown hair framed a grimy face, streaked with what looked like street dust and maybe dried tears. Her skinny arms were scratched, as if she'd climbed over a fence or pushed through bushes. Her slippers, once white, were now grey and worn. But it was her eyes that captivated David. Large, expressive, a brownish green that seemed to glow even under the ballroom's artificial light. They were locked on the candy table in the center of the room, a cornucopia of artisanal sweets arranged by a French pâtissier hired just for the event. She didn't appear to notice the adults around her, their growing indignation, their disapproving looks. All her attention was on the colorful macarons arranged in delicate crystal towers. David felt something strange in his chest, a painful twinge he couldn't explain. The girl couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old. What was she doing here, alone at a party where the cheapest outfit cost more than many people's monthly salary? "How did she get in?" hissed a woman in a red dress to the nearest guard, her voice thick with outrage, as if the child's presence was a personal insult. "I'm not sure, ma'am. We're checking the cameras now," he replied, touching the earpiece in his ear. "It seems she came through the service entrance during the shift change." The girl edged closer to the table, standing on tiptoe. Her thin fingers almost reached for a pink macaron when a hand shot out, grabbing her skinny wrist. The movement was so sudden that several nearby guests gasped in surprise. "What do you think you're doing?" Veronica's icy voice froze everyone's blood. She had appeared out of nowhere, moving with the speed of a striking cobra. Her long fingers, meticulously manicured in an elegant nude shade, squeezed the child's wrist hard enough to leave marks. The girl looked minuscule next to Veronica's imposing figure. Her eyes were wide with shock and pain, now locked on the perfect face of the woman holding her. I just wanted a sweet," she whispered, so softly that only those closest could hear. "You just wanted a sweet," Veronica repeated, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "Were you invited to this private party in one of the city's most exclusive hotels?" The girl trembled, tears brimming in her eyes. Her lower lip quivered, but she seemed determined not to cry in front of these well-dressed adults. No, but I saw the pretty lights and decided to sneak in and steal," Veronica finished, her face a mask of calculated indignation. She turned gracefully, still gripping the child's wrist, to face the guards. "Where is this place's security? How do you let a little thief into a private event?" The guards moved quickly. 2 burly men in black suits approached the girl. One reached out to grab her. "We'll take her outside, Miss Hastings." "Our apologies for the inconvenience." The girl began to cry silently, tears carving clean paths down her grimy cheeks. She didn't fight back, didn't scream. She just looked around as if seeking something or someone. That's when her gaze found David's. Something in that look tore through David like lightning. A jolt of recognition so profound that it left him momentarily breathless. Those eyes, the shape of that face, the way the left corner of her mouth tilted slightly downward when she cried. Time seemed to slow as fragments of memory bombarded his mind. Amelia, smiling at him under the neon lights of a less than sophisticated college bar. Amelia, hands entwined with his as they walked across a snowy campus, making plans for the future. Amelia, crying when he told her he'd landed his dream internship in another state. Amelia, sitting on the bed in a tiny apartment, saying she was pregnant. Amelia begging him to stay, while he insisted he wasn't ready, that he needed to focus on his career, that he would send money. The guards were already dragging the girl toward the exit. One held her arm with unnecessary force, as if she were a dangerous criminal rather than a frightened child. Veronica was smiling politely at the guests, downplaying the incident with graceful waves of her hands. "Everything's all right. Just a little intruder. Street kids are so bold these days." David felt his body move before his brain fully registered what was happening. In 3 long strides, he closed the distance between them. His hand reached out, gripping the shoulder of the guard who held the girl too tightly. "Let her go!" The words erupted like thunder, prompting stunned silence throughout the ballroom. The music stopped abruptly, as if someone had cut the power. "Let her go now!" The guard froze, confused, looking from David to Veronica, clearly uncertain whose orders to follow. He had never seen the usually composed Mr. Whitmore raise his voice like that. "David?" Veronica's voice carried a frosty warning, usually enough to make him reconsider any deviant behavior. "What are you doing?" He didn't answer her. Instead, he pushed the guard aside and lowered himself to the girl's level. Up close, the resemblance was undeniable. The same shape of eyes he saw in the mirror every morning, the same gentle curve of the chin, the same tiny birthmark near the right eyebrow, a family mark that went back generations. "What's your name?" he asked softly, ignoring the rising murmurs around them, and the electric tension of Veronica at his back. The girl sniffled, still trembling, looking at him with a mix of fear and something else, maybe a spark of hope. "Ellie," she said in a small voice that somehow echoed in the ballroom's tense silence. "Ellie," he repeated, feeling the name resonate inside him as if he had always known it, as if it had been sleeping deep in his consciousness. "Ellie what?" "Eleanor Whitmore," she said, a bit more firmly now, almost proudly. "It's my dad's last name." The silence that followed was absolute. 200 people holding their breaths in unison. Glasses froze in mid-air. Conversations ceased mid-sentence. David felt every gaze in the room pinned on him, waiting for his reaction. It was as if the world had stopped. When he finally spoke, his voice rang through the ballroom like a final verdict. "Let her go, she's my daughter." The roar of voices erupted instantly, like a ruptured dam. Glasses were knocked over. Someone audibly gasped. An older woman clutched her chest as though having a heart attack. The photographers, sensing a historic moment, fired their cameras in rapid succession, capturing for posterity the precise instant David Whitmore and Veronica Hastings' social empire began to crumble. Veronica stood motionless, her face a mask of ice and contained fury. Only the slight tremble in her lower lip and the whiteness of her knuckles betrayed the storm that threatened to explode at any moment. "What?" she finally hissed, each syllable dripping with venom. "What kind of absurdity is this?" David ignored her. Instead, he gently took Ellie's hand and pulled her away from the guards, who stepped back, still confused but obedient. Years of training to follow the commands of the rich and powerful left them at a loss when these same powerful figures clashed. "Did you come here alone?" he asked the girl gently, completely disregarding Veronica, which only fueled her silent rage. Ellie nodded, wiping her tears on the frayed sleeve of her dress, leaving another smudge of dirt on her cheek. "Mommy showed me your picture in the newspaper. She said this was where the party was." She looked down at her own feet, ashamed. "I shouldn't have come. Mommy will be mad." David's heart clenched with a pain he hadn't felt in years, a genuine pain, not tied to business or social status. "Where is your mother now, Ellie?" The girl hesitated, biting her lower lip. "At home. She's sick. She hasn't been able to get out of bed since yesterday." Before Ellie could continue, Veronica composed herself and stepped forward, her voice low and controlled, but still brimming with venom. "David, this isn't the time or place for whatever game you're playing. We have 200 important guests waiting for our official announcement." She forced a tense smile, glancing around at the crowd who were watching the drama as though it were a private theatrical performance. "We can handle this situation discreetly later." The word situation came out of her mouth as if referring to a pest infestation or a burst sewer pipe. David looked at Veronica, truly seeing her for the first time that night, perhaps for the first time in 2 years. The sculpted beauty, the calculated perfection, the emptiness in her eyes. How had he not noticed the vacuum behind that polished facade? "There's nothing to handle discreetly, Veronica," he said calmly, despite the emotional storm in his chest. "This is Ellie." "She's my daughter." "You don't have a daughter," Veronica snarled through clenched teeth, her social smile still fixed in place, though her eyes shot daggers. "We discussed every aspect of your life before we got engaged. You never mentioned a child." "Well, I do," David answered, a strange sense of peace washing over him as a long-buried truth finally surfaced. "And apparently, she found me." Harold Hastings then emerged beside his daughter, his normally ruddy face now pale with shock. As a ruthless business shark, he was already calculating the impact this scandal would have on the company's stock. "David, my boy," he began in a low voice, trying to create a bubble of privacy amid the chaos. "Let's settle this in private. We have a top legal team for this sort of complication." The word complication hung in the silent air, heavy with meaning. Ellie watched them, clearly frightened by the tension. Her small body trembled, and she bit her lip, fighting back more tears. She looked so tiny and fragile among all these powerful, well-dressed adults. That was when a low, almost inaudible sound emerged from the girl's stomach, a rumble of hunger magnified by the tense hush around them. Ellie blushed a deep red, wrapping her arms around her stomach as if to silence it. The sound broke something inside David. Suddenly everything, the lavish ballroom, the important guests, the deals, the empire he had built, all felt terribly trivial. He remembered his own hungry nights as a child, before his knack for business saved him from poverty. He remembered the promise he had made to himself never to be hungry again. And now his own daughter, his flesh and blood, stood before a table piled high with food nobody truly wanted, merely admired for its beauty and exclusivity, and she was hungry. "Are you hungry?" he asked gently, lowering himself to her eye level again. Ellie hesitated, flashing a quick glance at Veronica, as though fearing that admitting her hunger would make the woman angrier. Then, slowly, she nodded. "When was the last time you ate?" "Yesterday morning," she whispered so softly that David had to lean in to hear. "Mommy, she's not well. She couldn't go to work this week." Her stomach rumbled again, louder this time, and tears rolled freely down her face. She tried to swallow them, to be brave, but they were too many for such a small child to contain. "Mommy always said you were really busy," she continued through sobs that shook her small body. "I just wanted to see if you could help today. I'm so hungry." Her words hit David like physical blows. Busy. He had been busy for 7 years building a fortune while his own daughter went hungry. Too busy to check if the money he occasionally sent was enough. Too busy to ask if Amelia and the child he had never met were okay. A wave of shame flooded him, so intense it nearly made him stagger. How had he become this man? This stranger in expensive clothes who had abandoned his own family for status and power. "This is ridiculous," Veronica's voice sliced through the air like a razor, snapping him out of his moment of self-awareness. "David, you're not actually falling for this obvious scam, are you? A ragged child shows up at our engagement party, on this exact night, claiming to be your daughter." She laughed, a humorless sound that echoed through the hushed ballroom. "It's clearly an attempt at extortion. Someone found out about the upcoming company merger?" Some in the audience murmured in agreement. After all, stories of scammers trying to extort wealthy people with false paternity claims weren't unheard of. David stood up slowly, still holding Ellie's small hand. Now that she was near him, it was as if a part of him that had lain dormant for years had finally awakened. "Veronica, look at her," he said calmly. "Look at her face and tell me you don't see the resemblance." Veronica didn't so much as glance at the child, keeping her gaze fixed on David, as if willing him back to reason by sheer force of will. "I've seen many schemes in my life, David. Makeup, tricks, even surgeries to create fake children of rich men. You're too naive." David felt Ellie tighten her grip on his hand, as if fearing she'd be torn away from him at any moment. He looked down to see her face turned up toward him, those greenish-brown eyes, his eyes brimming with a mix of hope and fear. Veronica's father, Harold, stepped forward, assuming his usual role of solving problems with money. "David, my boy, let's handle this privately. We have lawyers to deal with this sort of complication. We can do a discreet DNA test if needed." He lowered his voice further. "And if it's true, well, we can reach a financially satisfactory arrangement for everyone." The older man's words sparked another flash of clarity in David. This was how every problem was resolved in their world, with money and discretion. Real feelings, moral consequences, and human responsibilities all took a backseat to business and public image. That was when Ellie, still holding David's hand, spoke again. Her voice small but surprisingly firm, as though she had mustered all her courage. "Sir, you have a little birthmark on the back of your neck, right here." She pointed to her own nape. "Mommy said I have the same one, that it's a family mark. She has a photo of you at the beach from before." David froze. The birthmark, a tiny mark he'd almost forgotten. It was hidden by his shirt collar. There was no way this child could know about it unless, with slightly trembling fingers, he loosened the collar of his shirt and turned his neck a bit. Harold looked, his face growing even paler. "Good heavens," the older man murmured, instantly recognizing the implications. Veronica observed, her face losing any remaining facade of cordiality. Her eyes narrowed, her posture stiff as steel. "Enough," she said firmly. "This is a staged hoax. Anyone could research that birthmark. There are pictures of you on the beach in magazines." But some of the conviction had left her voice. She glanced around, sensing that the guests' opinions were shifting. Whispered conversations spread through the ballroom. Judgmental looks were no longer directed at the ragged girl, but at the woman who had treated her so coldly. With precise steps, Veronica approached David and spoke quietly, so only he could hear. "Choose now, David. This child, or everything we've built." Her look was glacial, her voice a cutting whisper. "The prenuptial agreement is clear about scandals. If you go through with this, you lose everything. The merger, your partnership with my father, your place in this world, everything you've spent the last 10 years creating." The threat hung between them like a heavy smoke. David looked at Veronica, at the lavish ballroom, at the faces of the powerful people who now watched him with a mixture of shock and morbid fascination. Then he looked at Ellie, in her torn dress, eyes so much like his own. The decision, he realized with surprise, had been made the moment he saw those eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," David said, raising his voice so everyone could hear, "I apologize, but tonight's announcement will be a bit different from what you were expecting." Veronica froze beside him, her eyes narrowing in silent rage. "Don't do this," she hissed, gripping his arm tight enough to leave marks. "You'll regret this for the rest of your life." David gently removed her hand from his arm and continued as though she hadn't spoken. "The engagement between Veronica Hastings and me is cancelled. I appreciate everyone being here, but I have urgent family matters to take care of." The ballroom erupted in murmurs and gasps of shock. Camera flashes went off. Cell phones were held up, capturing the moment. The perfect party was ruined, turned into a scandal that would surely dominate the headlines the next morning. Veronica stood still for a long moment, like an ice statue. Her eyes, normally calculating and controlled, now burned with a cold fury David had never seen. When she finally spoke, and her voice was dangerously controlled, "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life. By tomorrow you won't have a company, a reputation, or a future." Each word was pronounced with surgical precision, as though carving each syllable in stone. "I've destroyed men for far less, David." David looked at her one last time, truly seeing the person he had almost married. The chilly beauty, the ruthless ambition, the void where humanity should have been. "Maybe so," he answered calmly, feeling lighter than he had in years. "But I'll have a daughter, and that's more than I've had in a very long time." He turned to Ellie, who stared at the unfolding scene with wide eyes. "Let's get you something to eat, and then we'll find your mother. She must be worried." The girl nodded, a hesitant smile appearing on her face. David picked Ellie up, noticing how alarmingly light she felt. No child of 6 or 7 should be so thin. As he passed through the gilded doors, David Whitmore, the business magnate, the rejected groom, the father reunited, felt, for the first time in years, like he was finally heading in the right direction. David's Audi rolled silently through the city streets, leaving the hotel and the scandal that would surely make the morning headlines behind. In the back seat, Ellie watched the passing lights of the city as though they were shooting stars. "Are you all right?" David asked, adjusting the rearview mirror so he could see her. Ellie nodded silently. She looked so small and fragile against the dark leather seat. David realized he didn't even have a child's car seat, another detail of parenthood he had never needed to consider. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice hesitant. "We're going to my house. You'll stay there tonight. And in the morning, we'll look for your mom, all right?" "Mrs. Gloria is with Mommy," Ellie said. "She lives in the apartment next door to ours." Hearing the word apartment, David felt a pang of guilt. What sort of place did Amelia and his daughter call home? For years, he'd sent occasional checks without ever questioning if they were enough, without ever checking on their living conditions. The drive to the upscale neighborhood where David lived felt longer than usual. As he drove, 1,000 thoughts crossed his mind. Veronica, the broken engagement, the deals likely to suffer from the scandal, the empire he had built. Yet none of those concerns felt as important as the quiet child in the back seat. When they finally arrived at the gates of his luxury community, the security guard waved respectfully at David. His eyes registered the unusual presence of a child in the back seat, but training kept him from showing any curiosity. "You live here?" Ellie asked, looking at the manicured gardens and well-lit mansions visible through the trees. "Yes. My house is just around that bend." When the car stopped at the entrance of his house, motion sensor lights illuminated an impressive structure of glass and stone. David watched Ellie's expression of pure wonder in the rearview mirror. "It's like a castle," she whispered. David turned off the engine and helped Ellie out of the car. She instinctively took his hand as they walked toward the front door. The security system recognized David's approach, and the door unlocked with a soft click. Ellie jumped back slightly. "How does the door know?" "It's just technology," David explained with a faint smile. "The house recognizes me when I get close." Inside the foyer, with its 6-meter-high ceiling and floating staircase in a modern design, Ellie paused, open-mouthed. Her eyes roamed over the artwork on the walls, the elegant furniture, and the Italian crystal chandelier cascading from the ceiling like a frozen waterfall of light. "Do you live here all by yourself?" she asked, her small voice echoing slightly in the large space. The question struck David like a punch to the gut. "Yes, just me." Ellie moved through the place as though in a museum, taking cautious steps and keeping her hands by her sides. When she stopped by an abstract sculpture on a side table, she stretched out her fingers slightly but quickly pulled them back. "You can touch it if you want," David offered. She shook her head, stepping back. "Mommy says you shouldn't touch things that can break." Another pang of guilt seized David. Rich kids never had to learn that constant caution born of necessity, that fear of breaking what they couldn't afford to replace. "Come, let's go to the living room," he suggested, guiding her gently down the hallway. The living room, with its Italian leather sofas and ultra-modern fireplace, felt even more impersonal now seen through a child's eyes. There were no toys, no family photos, nothing indicating the space was truly inhabited. "Have a seat," David said, indicating the nearest sofa. Ellie glanced at her dirty clothes and then at the spotless white couch. She perched on the very edge, hands clasped in her lap, feet not quite touching the Persian rug. "You must be hungry," David said, remembering she hadn't eaten since the previous day. Ellie nodded timidly. "Come with me to the kitchen." The kitchen was another showpiece of minimalist design, marble countertops, top-of-the-line stainless steel appliances, everything impeccably clean and barely used. David almost never cooked. He had a chef come in a few times a week, and he ordered from upscale restaurants the rest of the time. He opened the refrigerator, finding it nearly empty. Some drinks, imported cheese, a few leftovers in expensive containers. The pantry held the basics: whole grain bread, butter, some artisanal jam. "I can make you a sandwich." "Do you like jam?" "Yes, please," she replied, sitting on one of the high stools at the kitchen island. As David prepared the simple meal, he felt Ellie's watchful gaze tracking his every move. He wasn't used to being observed so intently, especially by eyes that mirrored his own. "Done," he said, placing the sandwich on a plate and pouring a glass of milk. Ellie took the plate with both hands, as though it were precious. When she took a bite, her eyes unexpectedly filled with tears. "Is it not good?" David asked, alarmed. She shook her head, wiping her tears away with the torn sleeve of her dress, leaving another streak of dirt on her cheek. "It's really good. It's just—" Her gaze swept around the enormous kitchen, the gleaming appliances, the abundance of everything. "I've never seen a house like this. So many pretty things." David's heart clenched. He could buy practically anything, and his daughter was amazed by a simple sandwich and a kitchen he almost never used. "This house has many things, but it was missing something important," he said, taking a seat beside her. "What?" Ellie asked, curiosity shining through her tears. "Someone to share it with," David answered honestly. After Ellie finished her sandwich, David showed her to the guest room where she would sleep. Like the rest of the house, it was elegant and impersonal. Expensive furniture, Egyptian cotton sheets, but no human touch. "The bathroom is through here," he explained, opening an adjacent door. "There are fresh towels and, well, I'm afraid I don't have any clothes in your size." "It's okay," said Ellie, looking in wonder at the king-size bed that seemed like an ocean compared to her small frame. "Tomorrow we'll buy you some new clothes," David promised. "And then we'll go find your mum." After helping Ellie settle in and making sure she knew how to call him if she needed anything during the night, David finally retreated to his own bedroom. Sitting on the edge of his bed, still in his suit from the party, he tried to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. His entire life had been turned upside down in a matter of moments. The engagement, the company merger, his carefully cultivated connections, all sacrificed in an instant. And yet, as he weighed the consequences of his actions, he felt no regret. The image of Ellie, his daughter, sitting on the edge of his expensive sofa, afraid to ruin it with her dirty clothes, burned in his mind. How had he become this man? This stranger in fancy clothes living in a soulless mansion, engaged to a heartless woman, building an empire at the cost of everything that truly mattered. Lying in the darkness, David Whitmore, the business magnate, the jilted fiancé, the reunited father, made a silent promise. No matter what happened to his wealth or reputation, he would not abandon his daughter again. It was time to make amends with the past and perhaps build something truly worthwhile. A family. Morning arrived with golden rays of sunlight drifting through the sheer curtains in the guest room. Ellie opened her eyes slowly, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar surroundings. The mattress was softer than anything she'd ever slept on. The Egyptian cotton sheets felt like clouds against her skin, and the silence, not the occasional neighborly disputes or creaking pipes, but real, peaceful silence, was almost unsettling. For a moment, she thought she might be dreaming. Then the memories of the previous night came rushing back. The lavish party, the man her mum had said was her father, the moment he shouted for everyone to hear that she was his daughter, the ride to this house that looked like it came out of a movie. She sat up in the massive bed, feeling tiny in the sea of white sheets. Her torn dress, the only clothes she had here, looked even more wrinkled after a night's sleep. Sliding off the bed, her bare feet touched the plush carpet. She walked to the window and pulled the curtains aside. The view of the manicured grounds left her speechless. Expanses of perfectly trimmed lawn, trees sculpted into elegant shapes, flower beds arranged in precise geometric patterns, and in the distance, a turquoise pool gleaming under the morning sun. It looked like a private park, bigger than any green area she had ever played in. A soft knock on the door interrupted her reverie. "Ellie, are you awake?" David's voice drifted from the other side, still strange yet uncannily familiar. "Yes," she said, suddenly shy. The door opened gently, and David appeared, already dressed in casual clothes, dark jeans and a simple shirt, a stark contrast to last night's formal suit. In his hands, he held a paper bag with the logo of a department store. "Good morning," he said with a hesitant smile. "How did you sleep?" "Fine," Ellie replied. "The bed is really big." "Yes, I guess it is. He held out the bag to her. I asked my assistant to bring some clothes for you. I hope they fit. Ellie took the bag and peeked inside. She found a light blue dress, a pair of jeans, a few colorful t-shirts, underwear with tags still attached, and even a pair of brand new white sneakers. Thank you, she said, surprised by the unexpected gift, running her fingers over the soft fabric of the dress. The bathroom is right there, David pointed to the adjacent door. There are clean towels in the cabinet. Take a shower and get dressed. Breakfast will be waiting whenever you're ready. He left, closing the door gently behind him, giving Ellie the space she needed to process all that was happening. The bathroom was yet another world of wonders, larger than her entire bedroom back home. It had a deep bathtub, a shower with multiple jets, and a marble vanity lined with toiletries that resembled those in a luxury spa. Ellie had never bathed in a place like this, and for a few minutes she simply stood there trying to figure out how it all worked. When she finally came downstairs 20 minutes later, she wore the new blue dress and white sneakers. The dress was slightly big, and the sneakers needed an extra tight lace so they wouldn't slip off her feet. But the feeling of new, clean clothes was indescribable. In the kitchen, David was busy at the stove, flipping what looked like pancakes in a frying pan. The sweet aroma filled the air, making Ellie's stomach rumble in anticipation. A small table by the window was set with plates, silverware, glasses of orange juice, and a bowl of fresh fruit. You look much better, David said when he saw her. The clothes are a bit big, aren't they? But we'll get your correct size later. Ellie smiled shyly, feeling oddly self-conscious, as though she were playing a part in a scene she hadn't rehearsed. Thanks for the clothes. They're really nice. You're welcome, he replied, stacking a plate with pancakes. Come, let's eat while they're hot. They sat down at the table, and David served Ellie pancakes, offering her different toppings: maple syrup, honey, fruit, whipped cream. I never know exactly what kids like, he admitted, looking slightly sheepish. But everybody likes pancakes, right? They're my favorite, Ellie grinned, picking up her fork. The first bite was a revelation. The pancakes were soft and fluffy, the maple syrup perfectly sweet. Ellie let out a small sound of delight. Good, David asked, watching her with a smile. She nodded enthusiastically, unable to speak with her mouth full. She swallowed, then asked, Did you make these yourself? Yes, he replied, a hint of pride in his voice. I don't know how to cook many things, but pancakes are my specialty. Learned how to make them when I was younger than you. As they ate, a comfortable silence settled between them. David watched Ellie discreetly, noticing how she savored each bite as if it were the most delicious thing she'd ever tasted. There was so much he didn't know about his own daughter, her likes, habits, preferences. 7 years of her life he'd missed. After breakfast, we'll go find your mother, he said finally. She needs to see a doctor for that fever. Ellie stopped eating and looked at him, her eyes suddenly serious. She put her fork down and took a deep breath, as though gathering courage. Can I ask you something? Of course. Anything. She hesitated, toying with a piece of pancake on her plate. Will you come with me to see Mommy? The simplicity of the question masked its real significance. It wasn't just about physically driving to see Amelia. It was about confronting the past, taking responsibility, facing the woman he had left behind when she was pregnant 7 years ago. Yes, David answered, feeling the weight of that single word. Of course I'll go with you. Ellie's face lit up with a smile that hit David like a sunbeam after a long storm. It was amazing how a child's simple smile could make his heart race like that. An hour later, after a quick call to cancel all his meetings for the day, David's Audi slipped through the city streets. The contrast between neighborhoods was stark, from the tree-lined roads and regal mansions of his upscale community, through the busy financial district where his office was located, and finally into a clearly impoverished area on the city's outskirts. The car pulled up outside a worn brick building with broken windows. The peeling paint revealed layers of older colors, like scars from a long life of neglect. Cardboard pieces replaced shattered glass in some windows, and graffiti covered the outer walls. A rusted metal gate, half off its hinges, offered entry to what had once been a small garden. but was now just hard-packed dirt strewn with trash. "This is where you live?" David asked, unable to hide the shock in his voice. Ellie nodded, already unbuckling her seatbelt. "On the 3rd floor. The elevator's been broken for ages." David took in the surroundings, his business-trained mind instantly assessing risks, the group of men on the corner eyeing the expensive car with predatory interest, the water stains on the walls suggesting serious structural problems, the warped metal bars on the windows hinting at break-in attempts. How had Amelia and Ellie ended up here? They got out, and David activated all the car's security features. Ellie grabbed his hand as if it were second nature, guiding him toward the entrance. In the lobby, the smell of mold and urine assaulted them. A lone bulb hung from the ceiling, barely lighting the space. Mailboxes, many pried open, lined one wall's scenes with names scrawled on tape. They started up the narrow staircase, the steps creaking ominously underfoot. Damp patches stained the walls, and the railing was loose in places. "Watch out for the 5th step on the 2nd flight," Ellie warned casually. "It's broken in the middle." David felt another pang of guilt as he realized his 7-year-old daughter had memorized which steps were dangerous in her own home. On the 3rd floor, Ellie led him down a dim hallway until she stopped in front of a door marked 307 in crooked numbers. The wood was warped at the bottom, likely from water damage. "This is us," she said, suddenly apprehensive. "Mommy might be mad." David swallowed hard, suddenly feeling like a nervous teenager again. "It's okay. She has every right to be angry with me." Ellie pulled a key from the pocket of her new dress and opened the door. "Mommy, it's me," she called as they entered. The apartment was even smaller than David had imagined, given the state of the building. One room served as living room, kitchen, and dining area, maybe 20 square meters in total, with 2 doors likely leading to the bathroom and a single bedroom. Still, despite the building's condition, the interior was clean and organized, showing obvious effort to make it feel homey. Colorful, handmade curtains, a few plants in improvised pots, children's drawings taped to the fridge. A worn sofa with a patchwork quilt doubled as an extra bed, judging by the pillow and blanket folded at one end. David felt a lump in his throat, realizing this was likely Ellie's sleeping spot, as the apartment seemed to have only one bedroom. "Ellie, is that you, sweetie?" A weak voice came from behind one of the doors. "Where were you? I've been so worried." A woman appeared at the bedroom door, leaning against the frame for support. Even after 7 years, even with her face pale from fever and dark circles under her eyes, David recognized her instantly. Amelia, his first love, the woman he had abandoned in favor of his ambitions. Time had taken its toll. Her once long, shiny brown hair was now shorter and lifeless. The vibrant figure he remembered seemed weary, bent by years of struggle on her own. But her eyes, those deep green eyes that once enchanted him, were the same, now wide with shock as they took him in. "David." She breathed his name in disbelief. "Hi, Amelia," he managed, throat suddenly dry. For a moment, none of them moved. Time seemed frozen in that tiny apartment. Then, as if snapping out of a trance, Amelia looked at Ellie with a mix of confusion and hurt. "I can't believe you went looking for him, Ellie," she said, her voice trembling with suppressed emotion. Before David could speak, Ellie rushed over to her mother, holding her hand and looking up with pleading eyes. "He's nice, Mommy." "He just forgot who he was," she said with that uncanny wisdom children sometimes possess. "He found me at the party and took me to his house. He made me pancakes this morning." Amelia's gaze shifted from her daughter to David, her emotions plainly visible: anger, pain, distrust, and something else that looked dangerously like hope. "You don't look well," David said, stepping closer hesitantly. "You need to see a doctor." "I don't need your charity," she replied automatically, but her legs wobbled, and she had to clutch the doorframe to stay upright. Instantly, David moved to support her, ignoring her initial resistance. "This isn't charity, Amelia. It's the least I can do." Though reluctant, her fever and weakness finally overcame her pride. After some discussion, she agreed to go to a private clinic with them. David helped her down the stairs, noticing how she tried to hide a persistent cough. At the clinic, The doctor diagnosed Amelia with early-stage pneumonia, prescribing antibiotics and strict bed rest. "You're lucky you came in when you did," he said, scribbling on a prescription pad. "A few more days, and it could have been much worse." 2 hours later, they left the clinic. Color was already returning to Amelia's face thanks to the intravenous medications, but her expression remained cautious whenever she looked at David. "Where to now?" David asked as he helped her into the car, treating her with a gentleness she clearly hadn't expected. "Home, I suppose," she said quietly, avoiding his gaze. "Mom," Ellie piped up from the back seat, "can we go to Dad's house? It's so pretty. There's a huge pool and a kitchen like in the movies." Amelia turned to look at her daughter, then at David. "I think we need to talk," she said at last. "Away from little ears." David nodded. "I know a place. There's a park near my home with a playground. Ellie can play while we talk." The park was a green oasis in an upscale neighborhood with immaculately maintained lawns and mature trees offering generous shade. A modern playground with brightly colored equipment stood at the center, surrounded by benches where parents and nannies watched children play. A few kids ran around squealing with delight, their laughter filling the late afternoon air. After getting permission from Amelia, Ellie ran toward the swings, excited to play like any normal child. Dressed in her new clothes and sneakers, she fit right into that world of privilege, though her unrestrained energy set her apart from the more subdued children around her. David and Amelia sat on a bench from which they could clearly see Ellie. For a few minutes, they just watched her, each lost in thought. "She looks like you," Amelia finally said, breaking the silence. "She has your eyes," David responded automatically, then corrected himself. "Well, the shape, not the color." A ghost of a smile crossed Amelia's lips. "Yes, she's a mix of both of us, stubborn like you, but kind like I used to be." Another silence stretched between them, laden with 7 years of unspoken words. "Why didn't you tell me?" David finally asked. "Tell you what? That I was pregnant. I did tell you, David." Amelia's voice held a hint of bitterness. "You said you'd send money, remember? That you'd just landed that dream internship in New York and couldn't throw it all away." David closed his eyes, shame burning in his chest. "I know. I don't mean then. I mean later. Why didn't you reach out when things got tough?" Amelia looked at him incredulously. "Reach out to you? The great David Whitmore, the business prodigy, the man on the cover of economics magazines. Why would I do that?" "Because I'm her father," he said simply. "That's a title you never wanted. I was young and stupid. Are you old and wise now?" There was a touch of sarcasm in her voice, but also a trace of humor that David recognized from the old Amelia, the woman he had fallen for in college. "No," he answered honestly. "I'm just a man who realized how much time he wasted chasing the wrong things." Amelia studied him, as if trying to read the truth in his face. "What changed, David? Why now?" He followed her gaze to where Ellie was swinging happily, the wind lifting her dress. She showed up at that party, so small, so brave. In that instant, everything I've built over the past years turned to dust. None of it mattered compared to her. "What do you expect to happen now?" Amelia asked, her voice softer, less defensive. "Honestly, I don't know. I just know I want to be part of her life. I want to get to know her, make up for lost time. And then, when the novelty wears off, when your priorities shift again." Amelia's eyes glistened, not from fever but from tears she fought to hold back. "I can't let you walk in and out of her life, David. That would destroy her." It was a fair accusation, and David knew it. He had abandoned Amelia once. What guarantee did she have he wouldn't do the same to Ellie? "I understand your distrust," he said after a moment, "but something changed in me the moment I saw her last night. I can't fully explain, but I know I'll never be the same." From the playground, Ellie waved frantically, pointing to the top of the slide she had just climbed. Both David and Amelia waved back, smiling without thinking. "Look at how happy she is," David said softly. "She deserves that every day, not just when she sneaks into a party." Amelia sighed deeply. "And how do you suggest we make that happen? You have your life, we have ours, completely different worlds." "They don't have to be," David replied. We can find a way. What way? David hesitated briefly, then decided to be completely honest. I don't know yet, but I do know I want to try, for her and for you, too, if you'll let me. Amelia looked at him in surprise. For me? We both know I messed up, Amelia. I chose ambition and money over you two. It was the biggest mistake of my life. I don't need your pity, David. It's not pity, he said firmly. It's responsibility. And maybe it's something more. Their eyes met, and for a moment, time seemed to rewind. They weren't the successful businessman and the single mother struggling to get by. They were just David and Amelia, the college students who once fell in love in a library during a snowstorm. Ellie now slid down the slide, laughing with pure childlike delight. From the bench, they could see that she glanced in their direction occasionally, checking to see if they were getting along. She's rooting for us, David said with a light laugh. What? Look at her. She keeps checking on us, making sure we're okay. She wants us to work as a family. Amelia followed his gaze, a gentle expression on her face as she realized David was right. Ellie was obviously monitoring their interaction between her bursts of play. It's always been her dream, Amelia admitted, having a dad, a normal family. No matter how many times I tried to explain that some families are just mother and daughter, she always said you'd come one day. And she was right, David said. I took too long, but I'm here now. For how long? Amelia asked, the crucial question hovering between them. It wasn't a question he could answer with words alone. It would take time, tangible actions, real commitment to prove he wouldn't disappear again. I understand, he said simply, but I'm ready to do whatever it takes to rebuild your trust, Amelia. I know it won't be easy. I'm willing to try if you are. Ellie had abandoned the swings and was now on the monkey bars, chatting cheerfully with another little girl. Her adaptability and ease in making friends were remarkable, given the turmoil of the past 24 hours. The doctor said you need complete rest, David reminded Amelia. Pneumonia is no joke. Why don't you stay at my place for a few days? There's more than enough room and Ellie can enjoy the pool. Amelia slowly shook her head. It wouldn't be appropriate. I have 5 guest rooms besides mine, David countered. You'd have all the privacy you need, and it would only be until you're fully recovered. Amelia pondered for a long moment, watching Ellie play without a care in the world. For her, Amelia finally said, nodding in her daughter's direction, I'm willing to try. For her. For her, David echoed, and maybe a little for us too. Amelia didn't respond but didn't deny the possibility either. It was just a start, as fragile as the first spring bloom, but it was a start. As they watched Ellie play at a distance, both knew the road ahead would be complex and full of obstacles. There were years of hurt to overcome, trust to rebuild, a gulf of separate experiences to bridge. But in that moment, beneath the afternoon sun, they made the same silent promise to try to build something better for the little girl who had unknowingly brought their worlds back together. The weeks flew by after Amelia and Ellie moved into David's house. What began as a temporary arrangement until Amelia recovered from pneumonia gradually morphed into something more permanent, though nobody dared label or discuss their new reality. The mansion, once cold and impersonal, slowly came to life. Ellie's drawings appeared on the refrigerator, held up by colorful magnets. A tiny pair of slippers waited by the back door for her morning explorations in the garden. Amelia's favorite mug remained in the kitchen cabinet, set apart from the others, small details, but significant ones. One sunny Saturday morning, David arrived at breakfast carrying a large box. Ellie peered over her bowl of cereal, curiosity shining in her eyes. "What's that?" she asked, tilting her head. "A surprise," David replied with a mysterious grin. "Finish your breakfast and meet me in the backyard." 20 minutes later, Ellie dashed across the lawn, her eyes sparkling at the sight of the pink and white bicycle David was assembling. The training wheels were deliberately left off, stored in the garage just in case. "Is it for me?" she asked, running her hand reverently over the handlebars. "All yours," David confirmed. "Have you ever had one before?" Ellie shook her head. "Never. Our building didn't have anywhere to store it." The simple statement hit David like always. whenever he learned of another hardship his daughter had endured in his absence. But today was about looking forward, not dwelling on the past. "Well, then we'll learn together," he said, fitting the helmet on her head. "First rule, falling is part of the process. Don't be afraid." Inside the kitchen, Amelia watched as she dried the breakfast dishes. David held the bicycle steady while Ellie, initially unsteady, tried to find her balance. The first few minutes were awkward. Wobbly legs, a swaying handlebar, near falls prevented by David's quick reflexes. What struck Amelia most was not David's endless patience or even his genuine joy in teaching something so simple. It was Ellie's growing confidence. The same girl who had begged for her father to come for years was now literally trusting him with her safety, believing he wouldn't let her fall. On the third attempt, Ellie managed to pedal a few yards on her own before losing balance. David ran beside her, ready to catch her, but didn't interfere. When she finally tumbled onto the soft grass, he didn't immediately pick her up. "Are you okay?" he asked, crouching down next to her. Ellie nodded, determination replacing the initial shock. "I want to try again." Amelia felt unexpected tears prick her eyes. That was her daughter, resilient, even at 7, shaped by years of hardships no child should face. Yet there was something new in her now, the security that came from knowing she had support. That falls did not mean she was alone. The morning wore on with attempts, tumbles, and fresh starts. David stayed close, jogging beside the bicycle, gradually letting go. With each lap around the garden, he stepped back a bit more, allowing Ellie to find her own balance. "You're doing great," he encouraged. "Look ahead, not down. The bike goes where your eyes go." Ellie bit her lip in concentration, following his instructions. She fell less frequently and grew more self-assured. The garden, with its winding paths and open spaces, was perfect, challenging enough without being dangerous. In recent weeks, moments like this had been piling up, quietly building the foundation of a relationship that had existed only in Ellie's imagination for so long. The way David cut the crust off her toast at breakfast, exactly how she liked it. The bedtime stories he invented, where a princess named Eleanor always saved the kingdom. His patience as he helped with her math homework, never making her feel inadequate for struggling. Then it happened. With her legs moving confidently, Ellie rode across the stone path of the garden on her own. David stopped a few meters away, watching with a mixture of pride and sadness for lost time. "Mom, I'm riding. I'm riding on my own," Ellie shouted, her face shining with a joy so pure it made Amelia's heart overflow. "I see you, sweetie," Amelia called from the window, unable to mask the emotion in her voice. David looked up, meeting Amelia's gaze. Something passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of a precious moment shared, another brick added to the fragile new structure they were beginning to call family. For an instant, time felt suspended. The golden morning light, Ellie's delighted laughter ringing through the garden, the wordless understanding between two adults who had once loved each other and were now rediscovering themselves through their daughter's eyes. It wasn't perfect. There was too much pain in the past, too much uncertainty in the future. But this moment, right here, was exactly as it should be. Ellie kept pedaling circles in the garden, each round more confident than the last. David sank onto a nearby bench, watching with pride as she mastered this small but significant freedom. "Look what I can do," she yelled, taking one hand off the handlebar for a second before grabbing it again, laughing at her own audacity. David applauded, his face reflecting her joy. "Amazing! You're a natural cyclist." From her window, Amelia realized she'd grown accustomed to this new reality without even noticing. The sight of David and Ellie together no longer felt strange or temporary. It began to feel right, like the pieces of a complicated puzzle finally fitting into place. That morning bike ride was just one moment among dozens of daily little triumphs. Ellie learning to swim in the pool with her dad's help, David learning to braid his daughter's hair under Amelia's patient guidance, the family game nights that were now part of their routine. Small moments, pieced together into something bigger. Something none of them had the courage to name yet, but it grew every day, as naturally as Ellie now rode her new bike. Amelia watched from the window as David and Ellie planted flowers in the garden, their laughter rising in the late afternoon breeze along with occasional sprays from the hose, inevitably leading to a little water fight. It should have warmed her completely, but a lingering shadow of fear hovered in her heart. 3 months had passed since they'd accepted David's invitation to stay temporarily. Amelia's pneumonia was long gone, yet they remained. The truth was, they'd never set a move-out date. The days just flowed into one another, each more integrated than the last, until the thought of returning to that cramped apartment seemed almost absurd. But how long would it last? That was the question keeping Amelia up at night. She'd seen Ellie thrive over these weeks. Better grades at school, more frequent laughter, that look of constant insecurity gone from her eyes. The crash would be devastating when, she couldn't help but think when rather than if, David reverted to the man she once knew, the man who valued ambition above all else. His phone rang incessantly, urgent emails demanding immediate attention, video conferences stretching late into the night. The company still consumed him, though he tried to hide it. And each call, each meeting he cancelled to attend Ellie's school play, each impatient glance at his watch during a business conversation fueled Amelia's fear. He was merely delaying the inevitable return to his real life. "You seem miles away," David's voice pulled her back to the present. He stood in the kitchen doorway, splattered with dirt and sweat, wearing a genuine smile. "Just thinking," she replied, averting her gaze as she dried a plate with more force than necessary. "Bad thoughts." Amelia hesitated. Over the past months, they'd learned to talk again, but some truths were still too hard to voice. "Your company," she finally said, placing the plate in the cabinet. "You cancelled 3 business trips this month. You were supposed to be in Chicago today." David nodded, sipping a glass of water. "They weren't essential. Jenkins can handle the investors. And last month it was Tokyo, and before that, London." She inhaled deeply, finally speaking her fear out loud. "You're sacrificing your career. One day you'll wake up resentful of us." A heavy silence settled between them. Outside, Ellie was still chatting happily to a butterfly perched on the newly planted bloom. "You think I'll change my mind," David said at last. It wasn't a question. "People don't change overnight, David. For years, your company was everything. You built an empire by discarding anything that didn't serve your goal. Including the 2 of you," he finished softly. "Yes, including us." David wiped his dirt-stained hands on a towel and moved to the window beside her. For a moment, they both simply watched Ellie, who was now trying to make a flower crown out of dandelions. "For 7 years, I worked more hours than any human should," he said finally. "I built the company from scratch, expanded to 3 continents, accumulated more money than I could ever spend in 10 lifetimes, and you know what I discovered?" Amelia looked at him, waiting. "That it doesn't matter how big your empire is. You still come back to an empty home every night." I never really grasped that until Ellie showed up at that party. "And I was miserable," he continued. "I built an empire that grew in direct proportion to my unhappiness. Look at me, Amelia. Really look at me. Do I look unhappy now?" She studied him. The man before her seemed years younger than the stressed executive she'd seen in magazine photos. The worry lines on his forehead had softened. His smile came more easily. "No," she admitted. "But what happens when the novelty wears off, when the guilt eases and ambition calls again?" Instead of answering right away, David walked to the kitchen table and picked up his leather briefcase. From inside, he pulled out an envelope and handed it to her. "What's this?" she asked, hesitant. "I signed it today. I was going to tell you at dinner, but maybe you should see it now." Confused, Amelia opened the envelope and read the documents. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock as she scanned the pages. You're stepping down as president of the company," David nodded. "I'll keep a seat on the board, participate in the major strategic decisions, but Michaels will take over daily operations. He's ready. In fact, he has better ideas than I do in several areas." "But the company is your life," Amelia whispered, the documents trembling slightly in her hands. "You sacrificed everything for it." "No," David said, gazing out the window at Ellie, now dancing in the sprinkler's mist. "It's not anymore." A heavy silence followed, loaded with meaning. These weren't just words, it was a concrete, documented choice. A tangible proof of change Amelia could hardly deny. "Why?" she finally asked. "Why now?" "Because I finally understand what really matters," he said simply. "I don't want to be remembered as the man who built the Whitmore empire. I want to be remembered as Ellie's father, as someone who corrected his worst mistake before it was too late." His phone vibrated in his pocket. He glanced at the screen and, to Amelia's surprise, he switched it off before putting it away. "I'm scared," Amelia admitted in a near whisper. "I'm scared to trust, to let Ellie fully trust you." And then, "I know," he interrupted gently. "And I can't promise I'll never disappoint you two again, but I can promise I'm restructuring my entire life so that you're at the center. Not words, actions." Through the window, Ellie's laughter filled the late afternoon air as she sprinted across the lawn, chasing a butterfly. Her hair, now healthier and shinier, bounced in the wind. Her pink cheeks showed a child who was finally able to just be a child. Amelia knew the fear was still there and might never fully disappear. Deep scars don't vanish overnight. Broken trust is like a repaired vase, the cracks always visible to those who know where to look. But for the first time, she allowed a different feeling to grow alongside the fear. Hope. Morning arrived in a golden glow, typical of late fall. David woke earlier than usual, a mind churning with the decision he'd have to make in the coming hours. On his bedside table, his phone blinked insistently. 3 missed calls from Marcus Heller, CEO of Heller Global Investments. Heller had been persistent over the past 2 weeks. The offer was on the table. Director of International Operations at Heller Global, with a compensation package that would make any executive pause and think. The cherry on top, a significant equity stake that could explode into wealth once the company went public the following year. The only catch, he would have to relocate immediately to Zurich, Switzerland. For at least 2 years, David went downstairs quietly, not wanting to wake Amelia or Ellie. In the kitchen, he brewed coffee and sat at the table with his laptop, reviewing Heller's contract for what felt like the 100th time. The numbers were staggering, but, looking at them now, he felt only a curious emptiness where his ambition once burned. "You're up early?" Amelia's soft voice startled him. She stood in the kitchen doorway, wrapped in a blue robe, her hair still tousled from sleep. "I couldn't sleep much," he admitted, closing the laptop. She approached and grabbed a mug to pour herself some coffee. "The Zurich offer." David couldn't hide his surprise. "How did you know?" "Ellie mentioned she heard you talking on the phone about living near the Alps," Amelia said, a sad smile tugging at her lips. "She thinks we're going on vacation." A heavy silence settled between them. David pushed out the chair beside him in invitation, and Amelia sat down. "I'm not taking it," he said simply. Amelia studied him over the rim of her coffee cup. "It's an incredible opportunity. Ellie and I would understand." "No, you wouldn't," he replied quietly, "nor should you have to." He reopened the laptop, showing Amelia the contract terms. Her eyes widened at the figures. "David, what? This is more money than anyone needs in 10 lifetimes, I know." He closed the laptop again. "There was a time I'd have signed without hesitation and started packing the same day." Amelia didn't immediately reply. Her eyes, deep and contemplative, seemed to see beyond him, perhaps picturing that David of years ago, the ambitious young man who left her without looking back. "What changed?" she finally asked. David smiled and pointed upward, toward the bedroom where Ellie was still sleeping. "Everything," he answered simply. "She changed everything." Light footsteps on the stairs announced the subject of their conversation. Moments later, Ellie appeared in the kitchen, dragging her favorite stuffed rabbit and rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Morning," she yawned. "Why is everyone up so early?" "There's no school today." "We were planning a surprise," David improvised, exchanging a conspiratorial glance with Amelia. "Want to know what it is?" Ellie's eyes lit up instantly. "Yes. I was thinking, would you like to invite some friends from school for a pool party next weekend? We could have games, maybe hire an ice cream cart." "Really?" Ellie could hardly believe it. I can invite Lucy and Hannah and Tyler. Anyone you want, David confirmed. It'll be the best party in town. Ellie hopped around the kitchen, already making elaborate plans for her new social event. Amelia looked at David with an expression of both gratitude and bafflement. Later that day, after Ellie ran off to play in the yard, Amelia found David in his study. He was on the phone, posture straight, voice firm, an executive in his element. "I understand perfectly, Marcus," he was saying. "Yes, I'm aware of the opportunity I'm turning down. No, my decision is final. I appreciate your understanding." Once he hung up, he noticed Amelia at the door. "So, it's done?" she asked. David nodded. "It's done. Are you sure you won't regret this? 2 years can pass quickly. We could visit you on holidays, stay in touch via video calls." He stood and walked to her. "Amelia, I missed 7 years of Ellie's life. I missed her first steps, her first words, her first day of school. I won't miss another day. And your career?" "My career is right where it needs to be," he said with a serenity that surprised even himself. "The Whitmore Enterprises board is satisfied with my involvement in strategic decisions. Michaels is doing an excellent job on daily operations. And I have time now for what truly matters." From the back of the house, they could see Ellie through the window practicing on her bike in the garden. She'd fully mastered balancing by now, weaving deftly around the pathways, occasionally glancing at the house to see if anyone was watching. "You know what I realized," David said, eyes on his daughter. "All those meetings, trips and negotiations, I thought I was building something important. But the truth is, we're building something far more meaningful here, day after day." Amelia felt her heart skip a beat at his words. Fear still lingered, of course, the fear of trusting, of believing, but also a new feeling, admiration for the man David was becoming. "It's a leap of faith," she said softly, "for all of us." "The biggest one I've ever taken," David agreed, "and in a way, the easiest." The phone rang again, likely Hella making one last attempt. David glanced at the device, then pressed the power button to turn it off. "Shall we go outside?" he asked, offering his hand. "Ellie's trying to ride without hands on the handlebars. I'm sure she'd love for us to watch." Together they walked into the sunlit yard where their daughter awaited, pedaling in ever wider circles, finding her balance in the world. The luxury shopping complex in the financial district gleamed under the afternoon sun. David strolled along, mentally checking off items as he searched for the perfect gift for Ellie. Her 8th birthday was approaching, and he had promised himself this one would be special, the first he would actually celebrate with her. After weeks of subtle probing into her interests, David had decided on a professional telescope. Ellie's fascination with the night sky was growing every day, especially after they discovered together the constellation that shared her name. It would be perfect, educational, durable, and something they could enjoy together. He was heading to a scientific instruments store on the 4th floor when he heard a familiar laugh. That laugh he knew so well, crystal clear, perfectly calibrated for social expressions of joy, never too loud or unrefined. Veronica. He stopped abruptly, instinctively stepping behind a decorative pillar. It wasn't fear. He had nothing to fear. Perhaps just the desire to avoid a tense scene, given how things had ended, publicly at an engagement party with 200 guests watching. From his makeshift hiding spot, David saw his ex-fiancée seated in the VIP area of the Blanc restaurant, the most exclusive in the mall. She was as dazzling as ever, blonde hair immaculately styled, designer dress that surely cost more than many employees' yearly salaries. Her fingers, no longer adorned with the engagement ring he'd once given her, were interlaced with another man's. David recognized him instantly. Lawrence Thornton III, heir to the Thornton telecommunications empire. Richer than David, more politically connected, and at least 15 years older. He watched Veronica lean in slightly toward Thornton, her gaze fixed on him with that intensity David had once believed to be genuine love. Now, observing from outside, the whole scene felt almost theatrical, too calculated, too staged. "The charity ball next week will be the social event of the season." Her voice carried far enough for David to hear. "With you as the main sponsor, all the papers will cover it. I'm thinking of wearing Valentino for the occasion. Something that complements your tuxedo. Thornton smiled, clearly pleased at the prospect. The governor confirmed his presence. It'll be an excellent opportunity to discuss that regulation on communication licenses. Veronica's smile brightened even more. My clever Lawrence, always 3 steps ahead of the competition. It was the way she said, "my," that struck David oddly. It was exactly how she used to refer to him. My brilliant David, my visionary David, as if it were a label or title, not a person. He was about to move on when Veronica said something that made him freeze. Thank goodness I got rid of that mess with Whitmore. Can you imagine if we'd followed through? I'd be stuck with a man playing Father of the Year to a child he barely knows. Thornton laughed. I heard he practically abandoned his business. The board's furious. The stock dropped 12% last quarter. Typical, Veronica said with a shrug. I always knew he didn't have what it takes to reach the top. That's why our arrangement was so perfect. My social influence, my father's connections, his ambition, we would have been unstoppable. Until he discovered that conscience he never knew he had. Her words hit David like stones, not because of the professional criticism, he no longer cared about that, but because of the clarity with which he now saw the relationship that had almost led him to the altar. It hadn't been love, it had been a merger, an acquisition, a market strategy applied to personal life. And he had bought into that narrative for years. He'd thought Veronica loved him for who he was, when in fact she loved what he represented. Status, power, a ladder to climb the social hierarchy. Well, when one door closes, another opens, Veronica continued, lifting her glass in a toast. To you, darling. To our far more advantageous partnership. David backed away quietly, feeling an odd lightness. In other circumstances, he might have been furious at what he'd heard or hurt, but now he felt only relief, as though the final thread binding him to his old life had been severed. He continued on to the store, selecting the most advanced telescope he could find, a Celestron reflector with an 8-inch aperture, equatorial mount, and a motor for automatic tracking of celestial objects. The salesperson seemed impressed by his technical knowledge, which David had gained from nights of obsessive research, to ensure he bought the perfect model for Ellie. On the drive home, Veronica's words echoed in his mind. A man playing Father of the Year didn't have what it takes. The irony wasn't lost on him. She believed he had failed by choosing his daughter over business, whereas it was the only truly correct decision he'd ever made as an adult. Pulling into the driveway of his mansion, David noticed Ellie in the front yard, helping Amelia plant tulips. The little girl's face lit up when she saw his car, and she immediately dropped her small spade to run toward him. Daddy, you're back. Mom let me plant 5 bulbs by myself. They'll bloom in spring and will be as yellow as the sun. David got out and crouched to greet her with a hug. Over Ellie's shoulder, he met Amelia's gaze. She gave him a gentle smile as she stood up and brushed the dirt off her jeans. We were waiting for you to have a snack, Amelia said. Ellie made sandwiches. I cut them into triangles, Ellie added proudly. They're tastier in triangles. Absolutely tastier, David agreed with mock seriousness. As they walked into the house together, Ellie between them holding both their hands, David felt a certainty solidify within him. Veronica was wrong. He wasn't playing at anything. For the first time in his adult life, he was simply being. And ironically, only now did he understand what reaching the top truly meant. It had nothing to do with market evaluations, board seats, or magazine covers. It had to do with his daughter's dirt-stained hand wrapped around his, Amelia's warm smile, and sandwiches cut into triangles. It had to do with being exactly where he was at that moment, finally home. Saturday dawned under a perfectly blue sky, not a cloud in sight. It was one of those rare early autumn days that felt borrowed from summer, warm enough for short sleeves, but with a gentle breeze that made everything just right. David woke to the sound of quick steps in the hallway and a lively knock on his door. Daddy, are you awake? You promised. Ellie's excited voice pierced the wood, brimming with anticipation. He smiled, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. He had almost forgotten the promise he'd made over dinner the night before, to take Ellie to the new amusement park by the coast and then to the mall to pick out a present. There was no particular occasion, just the desire to spend time together and create memories they'd never had the chance to form before. "I'm awake," he replied, sitting up. "Give me 20 minutes to get ready, princess." 15, Ellie bargained from the other side of the door. "And I already made my own breakfast, so you don't have to worry about that." David laughed. Her independence never ceased to amaze him, a constant reminder of how she'd grown up having to fend for herself far too often. When he went down to the kitchen, he found Ellie halfway through a bowl of cereal. She wore denim shorts, a bright yellow t-shirt, and new sneakers, obviously chosen carefully for their special day. Her hair was pulled back in a ponytail, a bit crooked, which she had clearly attempted on her own. "Good morning," he said, leaning in to kiss the top of her head. "I see someone's eager." "I've never been to a real amusement park," Ellie confided, her eyes shining. "Hannah said they have a roller coaster that loops 3 whole times." "Really? And you're brave enough for such a roller coaster." "Of course I am." She puffed out her chest. "I'm not scared of anything." David grinned, preparing a cup of coffee for himself. "Where's your mom?" "She said she has a design project to finish," Ellie answered. "She told us to enjoy our daddy-daughter day." Amelia's enrollment in an interior design course had been her own idea a few weeks earlier. "I need something for myself," she'd explained to David, "something that builds an independent future." He had immediately understood and supported her, glad to see her recovering not only physically, but also the dreams she had once shelved. An hour later, David's Audi pulled into the parking lot of Palm Bay Fun Park, the newest and largest amusement park on the coast. Normally, the prospect of crowds and lines would have annoyed David, but Ellie's excitement was contagious. She practically bounced beside him as they made their way to the entrance. "Can we ride the roller coaster first?" Ellie asked, clutching his hand as they entered. "How about we warm up on something simpler?" David suggested, eyeing the towering steel structure rumbling with cars full of screaming people. "Maybe the Ferris wheel?" Ellie accepted the compromise, and soon they were slowly rising into the sky in a colorful gondola. The view from the top was spectacular, the city on one side, the endless ocean on the other. "I can see our house from here," Ellie exclaimed, pointing toward the distant neighborhood where the mansion stood. "Our house." Those simple words warmed something inside David. In just a few months, the mansion that had never felt like home had become our house, a real home. The morning passed in a blur of attractions: carousels, Viking ships, the haunted train, where Ellie surprisingly grabbed his hand tightly, revealing there were a few things she did fear. And finally, after lunch, the dreaded roller coaster. "You sure?" David asked one last time as they waited in line. "No one will think less of you if you change your mind." "I'm sure," Ellie said, though her eyes betrayed a nervousness her voice tried to hide. To David's surprise, he was the one who shut his eyes during the wildest loops, while Ellie screamed with pure joy beside him, arms raised in the air. "Again," she pleaded as soon as they got off, her cheeks flushed with adrenaline. After 2 more rides and David finally beginning to appreciate the thrill, they left the park and headed to Lakeside Mall. "So," David asked as they strolled through the mall's gleaming corridors, "what would you like to pick out for a present?" Ellie bit her lip thoughtfully. "Can I look around first?" "Of course. We have all the time in the world." They visited store after store, toys, books, electronics, sports gear. David noticed how seriously Ellie compared prices, evaluated quality, and almost acted like a little grown-up. "You know you don't have to pick the cheapest option," he commented gently, seeing how she lingered over the more affordable items even when clearly drawn to others. Ellie looked at him, surprised. "It's a habit," she admitted with a maturity that broke his heart. "Mommy always said to pick things that last, not just the prettiest." "Wise advice," David agreed. "But today you can choose exactly what you want, maybe something that's both pretty and durable." Her face lit up, and finally, in the 5th store, she found it, a large, illuminated globe that also displayed constellations when the lights were off. "It's like having the whole world and the universe in one place," she explained, eyes gleaming. "I can see where we are during the day and where we look at night." Her enthusiasm for something so educational made David's heart swell with pride. As he helped her carry the heavy box to the car, he reflected on how incredible Amelia's job had been, raising such a special child against all odds. On the way home, they stopped at an ice cream parlor David had frequented as a boy, a family-run place, modest in appearance, which had survived for decades while big chains came and went. "This," he said as they parked, "is the best ice cream in town. I used to come here on Sundays with my dad." Seated at a sidewalk table with giant cones of mint chocolate chip, David shared stories from his own childhood, his strict but loving father, the mother he lost too soon, summers spent at a lakeside cabin. Ellie listened, fascinated, as though every fragment of his past was a precious puzzle piece she'd been missing. The sun was starting to set by the time they arrived home. Ellie insisted on carrying the globe herself, refusing David's offer of help with a fierce determination he recognized as a trait of his own. In the living room, they found Amelia dozing on the couch, surrounded by sketches and fabric samples. Ellie pressed a finger to her lips, signaling David not to wake her, and they tiptoed upstairs to set up the globe in Ellie's room. "Thanks for the best day ever," Ellie whispered as they plugged it in and the colors illuminated, showing continents and oceans in vibrant detail. David sat on the edge of her bed, watching the glow reflect on her face. "I should be thanking you for letting me share it with you." She leaned in and hugged him tight, surprisingly strong for someone so small. "You know something, Daddy," she murmured against his shoulder. "This was the best day of my life." Morning sunlight streamed through the windows as David sat in his home office, papers spread across his mahogany desk. Floor plans, contracts, deeds, all waiting for his final signature. He'd found the perfect house in Oakwood Hills, 4 bedrooms, a spacious yard, a tree that begged for a treehouse, and only 10 minutes from his own mansion. The decision had been tough, but necessary. After 6 months together, David sensed Amelia's subtle discomfort, a constant feeling of living on borrowed ground. She needed her own space, somewhere truly hers, where she could raise Ellie independently, but still close enough for him to remain a daily presence in both their lives. "It's very much yours. It carries your history," Amelia had said when he first suggested the idea. "We don't need charity, David." "It's not charity," he replied. "It's responsibility. The house will be in Ellie's name, in a trust I set up. You'll manage it until she turns 21. Consider it my way of making up for all those years I didn't contribute properly." Amelia had seemed torn between gratitude and unease. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll think about it," he answered. "It's 10 minutes from here, close enough for me to be involved in Ellie's life every day, far enough for you to have your own space." "And what about us?" she asked softly, so quietly he almost missed it. The question hung between them, too complicated to answer with simple words. The us she referred to was not just about housing arrangements, but the fragile emotional thread reconnecting their lives. "One step at a time," he finally said. "I don't need answers or promises yet. I just want you two to have stability." 2 weeks later, moving trucks lined the driveway of the new house. It was a 2-story property of exposed brick and large windows, the sort of place shown in family home catalogs. The front yard featured fresh flower beds bursting with color. Ellie sprinted from room to room, her footsteps echoing across hardwood floors. Every corner was a new and exciting discovery. "Mom, come see my bedroom." "There's a huge window, I can see the stars at night." Amelia smiled, watching her daughter's excitement while movers carried in the few boxes containing their belongings from the old apartment. Most of the furniture was new, David's gift. He'd insisted they start this chapter with a clean slate. Outside, David supervised the delivery of a special bed he'd ordered for Ellie, shaped like a spaceship, complete with built-in lights that projected constellations onto the ceiling. "Mr. Whitmore," called one of the movers. "Where do you want the piano?" "In the living room by the window," David replied. The piano had been a last-minute addition. He recalled Amelia mentioning she'd always dreamed of learning to play, but never had the means or opportunity. When the last box was unloaded and the trucks pulled away, the 3 of them stood in the sunlit living room. Ellie spun in circles, staring at the high ceiling and delicate chandelier. "It's so big," she squealed. "We can make an echo in here." Hell, oh, she shouted, giggling at the reverberation. David and Amelia exchanged smiles, watching the child's pure delight. I think she approves, David said quietly. How could she not? Amelia replied. It's perfect, David. Almost too perfect. He understood her hesitation. This was a dramatic change in circumstance, especially coming from the man who once left her pregnant. Trust was like a delicate plant, growing slowly after a long drought. Mom, Ellie called, running toward them. Can we have a picnic in the backyard to celebrate? There's a perfect tree out there. Minutes later, they found Ellie under a majestic oak, laying a cloth on the ground and arranging stones in a circular pattern. To mark our territory, she explained seriously, like explorers. The three of them sat on the cloth, eating sandwiches and chatting about plans for the new house. What color to paint the bedrooms, where to put the TV, how to set up a study area for Amelia's design course. You know, Mom, Ellie said suddenly, munching an apple. See, it was good I went looking for him. He changed our lives. The childlike sincerity of that statement rendered Amelia momentarily speechless. Her eyes met David's, a silent exchange of gratitude, shame over the past, and hope for the future. David smiled, moved, and said, No, my little one, you changed mine. I was blind and didn't know it. Ellie cocked her head, considering his words with the serious concentration only children possess. So we helped each other, she concluded matter-of-factly. That's how families work, right? Yes, Amelia said gently. That's exactly how families work. The rest of the afternoon passed in a whirl of activity, unpacking essentials, organizing the kitchen, assembling Ellie's spaceship bed. When the sun began to set, painting the sky in orange hues, David reluctantly picked up his keys. I guess I should go, he said. You both need rest. Ellie clung to his hand. You'll come back tomorrow. Absolutely, he promised. We still have a treehouse to build, remember? Satisfied, she hugged him tightly, then dashed inside, eager to try out the constellation lights in her new bed. Amelia and David stood alone on the porch for a moment. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for the house, but for everything. I used to think wealth meant money in the bank, stocks on the rise, properties on multiple continents, David answered, gazing at the bright windows where his daughter was. Now I know true wealth is right there, inside a home, a family I nearly lost because I couldn't see what truly mattered. Amelia smiled softly. 10 minutes is quite close for dinner tomorrow night. His grin lit up his face. I'll be here. The lesson had come late, but it was etched deeply in his heart. The greatest treasure lies in family, and he was determined never to forget that again. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next ones. Leave a like because it helps this story get recommended to more people. See you in the next story.